So rhyme, alliteration, onset and rhyme, aren't these all a little overrated? I mean, do kids even need these to learn to read well? Didn't they learn them in pre-K anyway? I'm going to be honest here and say that there was a time I just quickly talked about phonological awareness skills like onset and rhyme as if they were an unimportant, brief stop on our journey to real reading. Those were pre-K things. I thought we didn't have much time for them. With a few more years experience now, I wonder if I was wrong. Was I making my job harder by disregarding phonological awareness skills? We're going to talk more about that, and I'm going to give you an example of how I use writing to teach one of these skills. I'm Sarah, a teacher that had big dreams as a kid of being a best-selling author, and now I love to use writing to help kids learn to read. Today's big topic, phonological awareness. And yes, I do incorporate a little bit of writing into this part of the day. So let's get more into how I make that happen. First, let's do a quick little review of what phonological awareness is. In the most simple words, phonological awareness is hearing the sounds in words. It's blending, segmenting, and manipulating the sounds in words, both big chunks and small individual units. It can include activities that help children master skills like rhyming, alliteration, onset and rhyme, and phonemic awareness activities. Phonological awareness was most important to me as a teacher when I taught pre-K. So when I moved on and taught both kinder and first grade, I remember thinking, rhyming and alliteration, why are we still working on that 2 years later after they should have already learned it in pre-K? Well, yes, they should have learned it in pre-K, and yes, we should still be working on it. First, some kids just need more time in this area, period, even if they went to the very best pre-K. But it took me several years teaching kindergarten and first grade before I realized the number of kids that were coming in my doors that did not attend a pre-K where they would have learned skills like how to differentiate words in a sentence, or rhyming, alliteration, onset and rhyme, and finally the most difficult skill, hearing the actual phonemes in syllables. I've linked an article from the Shanahan on Literacy blog that gives a much better description of phonological awareness and how it includes phonemic awareness and so much more. And I love this source. Anytime I have questions about reading instruction, I go and see what Shanahan on Literacy blog says. I mean, like anything, I don't love everything he says. And some of it might be hard to hear because it might be something different than what I knew before. But it is an amazing, reliable bank of knowledge about reading instruction. He cites all the official research and sources at the bottom, and he talks about that research in a very non-biased, no-nonsense way that I feel like I can understand. I mean, yes, I have to read it twice sometimes. And if I don't understand it, he has a podcast where he revisits and simplifies a lot of those articles. I've also noticed he's humble enough to change his mind about some things he has believed in the past, which builds a lot of trust with me as a teacher. I don't trust anyone that can't ever say, hey, maybe we were wrong there. Because if you can't say that, how are you even getting any better? And the best part is he has spent time actually teaching real children in a first grade classroom. So why do we even need this? Why bother including this in your day when you have so much more to do? Well, I have said before that I don't really use small group table time to work on the larger chunks of speech, but instead I focus on the phoneme. Hearing and manipulating the phonemes in words is very much worth the table time. But does that mean I think phonological awareness is a waste of time in large group too? No way. We do most of our phonological awareness time as a large group and constantly review and revisit those skills. If you have students that are still struggling to hear phonemes within words and syllables, you can help them by first blending, segmenting, manipulating the larger chunks of sound during some of that time of the day. And hopefully your curriculum hits on some of those skills. That might just help them get down to the phoneme. After assessment, you'll know what skills kids are struggling with, and you can make a plan moving forward for what you will do with them at the table. I tended to keep my table time for word chaining and other activities that focused more on phonemes and letter learning instead of improving things like kids' rhyming skills, but you are the teacher. Assess and make the best plan you can for that student that would make the best use of your small group time that they get to have with you. In my classroom, I address rhyming, alliteration, onset rhyme, all of those things during large group times. And I only use small group time at the beginning of the year to make sure they are playing the games correctly that I introduced to practice each of the phonological awareness concepts, which I'll come back to in a minute. Then after I've introduced a skill like alliteration along with the game, I continually review those skills because they will need the vocabulary words rhyme and alliteration when we study poetry later in the year. So I don't ever just let those go. But I like to save myself small group time for addressing syllables and phonemes because I have found that to be the fastest route to decoding well. And phonological awareness overall helps with the fastest route to the phoneme. I talked more about this in a previous video, but I usually spend the first few days of school listening for words and sentences. I say a phrase or a fragment or a sentence, which is another great way to revisit sentence versus fragments. And the kids hide their boards and draw a line moving from left to right on their board with a marker. So they have to include spaces and make the lines longer for longer words and shorter for the shorter words. And then I give them a quick token or stamp, and then they can move on to the next part of the day. So I am Sarah. I am, it's a little bit longer, Sarah. Sarah, that's 2 syllables, so that's going to be a little bit longer of a word. Now think about all the concepts of print that come up naturally here. Top to bottom, left to right, and spaces between words. Is this convincing you that phonological awareness is important and should take up some space in your day, at least at the beginning of the year? So the next week, more phonological awareness skills are rolled out slowly and each take about a week to introduce and to practice with close monitoring, possibly in small group if there is time. So I know they are practicing correctly before allowing them to use these tools and games independently. So I might reserve a little bit of small group time for these skills and games depending on the class, but I don't usually get too far into the year before relying more on the large group spiral to help kids with skills like rhyme, alliteration, onset rhyme. I usually reserve a lot of the table time for the phonemes. So after I've spent a few days helping them hear the words in a sentence, I spend a week introducing other phonological awareness skills like alliteration, rhyme, onset rhyme, syllables, and phonemes. After all these are introduced with some fun song or a read aloud and then reinforced with an activity or game that incorporates writing, even a small way, I spiral through these skills throughout the year with specific focus days. Alliteration on Mondays, rhymes on Tuesdays, onset and rhyme word families on Wednesdays, syllables on Thursdays, and phonemes on Fridays. Want to see an example of how one of these lessons has a game that incorporates writing? Make sure to go back and check out my last video or go to the link below and get the free workshop where I go over all that and so much more. So what about my kid at home? Am I going to spend summertime talking about alliteration and rhyme? Not likely. Summertime is precious time. Now, if I notice she's really struggling to pick up phonemes, and if she struggles to spell CVC words with 3 simple sounds because she isn't hearing the difference in the sounds, I might go back and spend some time working on those other skills too, so that I can get down to the phoneme. But the great thing about these games that I use, we could easily do them on our binder with a marker on a trip or at a basketball tournament. So I'm not saying I won't be doing it either. If you want to hear more about how I weave not just writing, but also cooperative learning strategies into phonological awareness to create a strongly woven fabric of foundational skills for reading and writing, make sure you go check out the free workshop and other freebies in the description below. In that workshop, I go deeper into all those phonological awareness skills like rhyme, onset rhyme, syllables, and finally phonemes. So you can get your students ready to read and spell at the same time by incorporating writing into phonological awareness activities.